This thing is crawling into bed at night. And he said, I can see the imprints of it crawling into bed with us. And he's like, it'll start twirling my wife's hair. And he said, I can feel it rubbing against my feet.
This is an emergency broadcast. This is not a test.
Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today. We have a great episode lined up. But before we get started, make sure you check out the Veil Report. This is our monthly email that goes out with behind-the-scenes content and early drops. So make sure you check out the link in the description and the pinned comment. And don't forget, if you like what we're doing here on the podcast, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Today's guest is Nathaniel Gillis, a demonologist who attempts to map the intelligence behind the unexplained. 2 decades of research and a framework he calls preternatural epiphenomenal philosophy. Translation, he believes we've mislabeled what's been knocking in the dark. I'd buckle up for this one. If you could introduce yourself to people who don't know you, maybe how you came, and you don't have to spend too much time. I know you've talked a lot about the haunted kind of experience you have when you're a kid, but just kind of give everybody like a sense of how you came to be in your line of work.
Yes. So my name is Nathaniel Gillis. I am often described as a demonologist, a phenomenologist, and here lately, I do not know what to identify as in this field. My first encounter with the phenomenon, of course, was in a haunted house that I grew up in. I was touring this house prior to my family purchasing it. In the middle of the tour, I came face to face with the full-bodied apparition of a little girl. And so that's when I realized I was in for it, especially if my parents purchased this house. Something bad is in this place. And so once we moved in, as the phenomenon does, it mutates, it evolves. And so that little girl never really existed, at least in this dimension. She didn't belong to any neighborhood, didn't belong in any other neighbor, family, anything like that. And so here I was after moving in. About 3 a.m. There's this pregnant silence in the home. All of a sudden, I hear the heavy footfall of an entity displacing its way to the living room on the wooden floor. So it's creak, creak, creak. And like a program, it would it would just strengthen its power. I would feel this pervasive presence of fear and terror. It would kind of move its presence right in front of my door. And then I could feel it just enter in. And so I realized that in there, whoa, we are not alone. I don't know what this is, if this is a species or if this is a program or what it is. But it was monitoring me. It was monitoring my thoughts. It was monitoring my behaviors. And what's funny about this particular case, at least in my career, was that it wasn't just an apparition, right? It was disembodied voices at nighttime. I would wake up to full-blown conversations occurring above my head where the entities were talking to each other.
Jeez.
And yeah, it's wild stuff, but I could hear them conversing. And the only way I can explain it is that they were far enough away from me for me not to understand what they were saying. They were close enough to me for me to hear them. So it was this kind of aspect of them toying with me that was present. And so that's what I grew up with in that particular home. But there came a point in my experience in that house where I realized something, and that was that whatever this entity was, or whatever this intelligence was almost projecting a fear upon me and watching how I dealt with it. And so, right, I would ask myself, like, this fear seems fabricated or manufactured. I don't know what this is. I'm like a 9-year-old kid, right? I don't know what this is. Why should I be afraid of it? And so that's when I realized very quickly on set, like, okay, this is almost like a game. And I'm not saying it is or was, but that's what it felt like at the time. And that's when I started to starve it. And I came up with what's called, not then, but now I'm calling it preternatural epiphenomenal philosophy. And that is the aspect that there's a difference between feeling the fear it fabricates and being afraid of it. And so I allowed myself to feel the fear, but I did not allow myself to be afraid of it. And so understanding those two components of free will, right? I have my own autonomy. You're trying to goat me into some kind of obedience or symbiotic relationship where I feed you with my fear and you leave empowered. So I started to run kind of mind experiments on it, right? Again, I'd feel the fear, it would project, and I would just ignore it. And it would just slowly die down. And finally, one day it did. But anyways, that kind of led me into wanting to understand more about what this phenomenon is, what it represents to our species, because there were a series of symptoms I encountered in that home. Mainly, obviously, we have the full-bodied apparition, we have the disembodied voices. The phenomenon was looping me into very, very dark and sinister nightmares where um, very bad things happen to people at their own hand, if we kind of skirt around that. And what's so unique about that experience was that where and when the dream should end, it wouldn't. I would go to wake up and I would be induced into a deeper sleep and then be rolled back into that nightmare from square one.
Jeez.
All the way to the end, and then it would loop me back to the beginning. Yeah, and to this day, there is still some kind of, I mean, even talking about it, right? It's weird. It's difficult sometimes, but there's some kind of PTSD lingering. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Would you say that followed the typical oppression, kind of possession pathway that it was trying to follow when you look at traditional exorcisms and what they talk about? Or was this something different or a hybrid?
Well, I think it was oppression, depression. There was, I don't believe it could have been on a trail of possession.
Mm-hmm.
I should say. Thankfully, I never got there. This was, again, like you said, more of oppression. And yeah, I would lock myself in my room, and I would literally sleep at night with the lights on. Yeah, that's if I could sleep. Matter of fact, this was like during a time in my schooling period where I would stay up all night long. And then when the sun rose, I would get about 45 minutes of sleep before my mother would, get me ready for work or for work. Yeah, I used to have a job. No, ready for school. Then when I went to school, I'd pass out and I started failing classes, and I believe I failed a grade, and they didn't know what was going on, and how I didn't know what was going on. But there came a time in that part of my life, I think it was maybe about 14 or 15, when I started to approach my church leaders saying, okay, like, what is this? Have you guys ever experienced anything like this? And what I found was utter silence. And if it wasn't utter silence, it was just patronizing me, or at the very least saying, well, this is funny. Later on in my life, they would confess to their experiences, but at that time in my life, they didn't want anything to do with it. It was just, oh yeah, you're lying, you're crazy. And if what I experienced did not fit their blueprint of demonology, which at least not even demonology, whatever they were taught in Sunday school, there was no real response. And so here I am trying to battle what I perceived to be abject evil as a child, right? Or even at 15 years old. I mean, I can remember my aunt dying, and it was very close to her. I helped her. She was very sick, so I helped her in the summertime with her insulin and stuff. But after she passed away, I was grieving very, very, very hard. And we had moved into a new house. It's at nighttime. I have my radio on, and I'm next to a window, and the wind is blowing the rain on the window. And I'm kind of crying. I'm honest. I'm broken. And all of a sudden, the radio fuzzes out into white noise. And I hear the voice of my aunt beginning to speak to me through the radio.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying this podcast, Buy Me a Coffee helps us book guests and keep the episodes coming. Follow the link in the pinned comment. Let's get back to it.
As soon as it did, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I had a chair, and I had a glass of water on the table right in front of it. It was an immediate reaction. The voice comes through the radio. The hair on the back of my neck stands up, and that glass of water goes flying across the room and shatters on the wall. And that's the last, I guess, attachment of paranormality I've had in my career. Even though, mind you, since then I've been on tons and tons of investigations. So whatever that was in my life, I don't know. There's this kind of saying that, the teacher's always silent when the test is being taken. So that may in and of itself have been some kind of initiatory practice where whatever this is, or whatever they are, something, right, was revealing its presence to me.
So you don't believe that was your aunt?
Absolutely not.
No. Okay. I thought about a lot about how we get into the subject because I guess your thesis or what you propose is very interesting. And it's almost like to let people know what that is. I'm sure a lot of people already know what you believe, and then kind of like digging deep into that to understand why you believe that and the evidence for it. Because when you say you didn't believe that was her, obviously the question is, do you ever believe that past loved ones can communicate, or is this thing, whatever it is, always tainting this and has the control over this realm in a sense? Because everybody has those stories, of people passing away, things happening. I've had some of that stuff. My mom's had some of that stuff. So I guess if you want to, answer that or fold into that answer your theory about what you believe, hauntings, paranormal activity, UFO stuff, all that stuff, what that you believe that to be.
Well, I am a proponent of what's called the unified field theory. And there's more than a few of us in the field now, and we're just now starting to reveal the research we've been doing for these many, many years. But the unified field theory hypothesizes, I guess, that the paranormal field itself is all one singular intelligence, and that everything that is in existence in terms of paranormality operates underneath that sphere. Everything is connected. It's a tree with many roots and many branches, but it's the same phenomenon. And so the reason I came to that conclusion is because early on in my research of incubi literature and incubi cases, which if people are familiar with that, it's an entity that appears to women in the form of a man and tries to copulate with them. But early on in my research, I started to realize that the phenomenon has virtually 100% control over our perception of it. And that's why I am extremely guarded when it comes to apparitions, even parts of the demonic, because I believe, again, that this plays into their hand. I'll give you a case in point. In the 1950s, there was a group of physicists in the federal government called the Collins Elite, and they had more of a religious background. And a lot of people in the field have kind of poo-pooed them and frowned upon them because, they were non-sophisticates and stuff. Well, they had PhDs. These were very sophisticated people, but what they approached the phenomenon through the lens, I guess, of the phenomenon being demonic. It's horns and hooves. And to their utter astonishment, there were parts of the phenomenon that fit that bill. But they concluded that whatever we're dealing with is either in control of our perception of reality or it's in control of reality itself. Those are the two main arguments right now going on in the field. We're way beyond the demonic hypothesis. But to your question, I want to get down to the root of this. Number one, the phenomenon has the ability to manipulate our perception of it. And it goes through various stages of that. If it cannot tell us what to see, it'll tell us what to believe we saw. And if we don't buy into that, it will try to remove portions of our memory. And if that doesn't work, it will attack people. This is the control mechanism Jacques Vallée plays into and talks about in his research, where the phenomenon has been known to actually take people out because it does not want its true nature, its true face to be made manifest among us. So my point is, even with the demonic hypothesis, there are aspects of the phenomenon that do not fit that bill. And this is one of the problems I had early on in my research was like, okay, I have access to this literature. I'm being told this is demonic. And yet I'm being told this by people who've never actually done the research of demonology. And these are kind of prerequisites. Okay, who's your favorite demonologist? And if they tell me it's somebody from TV, immediately I'm like, all right, have a seat. Let's go back, right? Let's talk about Bernard of Gordon, T. Whitten Davies. Let's get done. But you'll see, and I've seen this in my own career, where it's very quickly, whoa, I don't know anything about that. It's like, okay, then if you don't know anything about it, right, we need to kind of get back to the conversation and ask ourselves what's actually occurring. Mm-hmm. And so one of these instances that really changed my perception of the demonic was the confusion of an incubus demon with an occultist. This happened with Father Sinister of Amino, where, again, the entity that was allegedly a spirit was leaving biological secretions on their victims. Spirits can't do that. They do not have semen. There is no ability to procreate. And from my perspective, I thought that would be like, oh, well, yeah, right? I thought it'd be like, well, that kind of makes sense. Well, still, that's the gulf in demonology, where, again, Sinistrata of Amino documented two aspects of this phenomenon, just to kind of show everybody where we're at in demonology. And the rest were like, okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Father. Have a good night. And nobody has sat down and actually questioned why this entity had manifested to this experiencer as something interdimensional or even alien. And yet it was leaving semen on the skin, on the blankets, on the clothing. Not just that, but in conjunction with the secretions, these beings were carving sigils underneath their eyelids.
Jeez.
So then, right, my new friend, I had to sit down with people and say, okay, do you know what sigils are? Then it blew my mind, because it's like, okay, this is like stuff that's been out for hundreds and hundreds of years. And what I fear has happened is people have hung their hat, oh, it's demonic, without actually sitting down with the question and saying, okay, what do you mean by that?
When the UFO stuff first came out, and then you had certain aspects of the religious community say, oh, it's demons. I have to admit, I rolled my eyes and go, everything's demons. Everything's, if we don't understand it, and there might be, something spiritual aspect, and it's demons. I mean, I admit I could be wrong, obviously, with my skepticism, but am I correct in saying that even you're saying that label is just another form that this thing has taken through eons? So even calling it demons isn't the right label, and it's misrepresenting this to people, because now we're just thinking Satan and horns, like you said, and hooves.
Yes. So, and we'll get to the Incubus in a second here. But yes, so my perception of this is that we're dealing with a proto-intelligence, something that is behind all of the archetypes, right? A learning matrix, which I don't know how much time we have today, but we'll probably get into that too, where there are components to these programs that the phenomenon employs in our presence, these interfaces. Number one, we have archetypes, right? And I'm not just talking about Jungian archetypes, but literally just roles the phenomenon plays when it interfaces with us. We have apparitions. We have the alien, the extraterrestrial. Then we have the interdimensional. Then we have the guide. And then, of course, the demonic, it's the demon, right? The problem we're having now is that and I'm not just talking about people in academia, but people that are actually doing in-field research, right, with academic backgrounds, when we start engaging with the phenomenon, we're realizing very quickly that this is donning a guise. It's masked down when we're interfacing with it. And so what we're seeing in the field is fascinating. It's the same thing in the skull experiment, where the phenomenon will diversify its identity in our eyes. I'm all of these. Oh, see, right? I'm an apparition. Oh, I'm a demon. I'm a ghost. I'm a guide. Now, in the skull experiment, for people who don't know, the skull experiment happened in the 1990s. It was in England, and it was with Robin Foy and a group of parapsychologists, psychic mediums. They were trying to punch through the veil, but they got to a certain point where they started dealing with what's called the spirit team. There was a team of 13 individuals on the other side. Now, immediately they got in contact with NHI. They went beyond all of the archetypes. Oh, you're my guide? Yeah, okay. Next. This is what we're dealing with, right? Uh-huh. Okay, you're a deceased loved one. Yeah, I'm a deceased scientist. Okay, that is fascinating. We're thankful you're here. Can we move beyond that now? Like a program, the phenomenon said, okay. Right? Not, oh, by the way, they don't exist. No, of course we're here. Deal with us. Not at all. The phenomenon said, okay, it's almost as if they were dealing with, again, I'm going to keep using the word programs, where the phenomenon was saying, okay, once you get to this level, we're going to switch hands. Another installment's going to come forward. This archetype's gone. You're going to interface with this one. And so it was like 400 or 500 hours worth of sessions. And by the time they punched through the last archetype, this is very dangerous. They gave control of the room over to the spirit team on the other side. Never do that. And immediately the atmosphere changed. Something began to incarnate in that room. This is what I'm talking about. Again, diversification of identities. I'm guides, ghosts, ancestors, apparitions, aliens. In one session, my new friend, the phenomenon took all of those horizontal archetypes, made them vertical, and collapsed them into one incarnation. Now they had apparitional aliens, an apparition of an alien. I thought they were separate. No, an apparitional alien, right, who's looking at people, moving its head back and forth and saying, I'm your guide. That's the kind of research we're doing where, again, I'm to the point now where I do not trust anything that I see.
Jeez.
Case in point, even Gary Nolan just came out recently with a case he's been working on with a family in France. And the case came in because it was a child. The child was looking through the skylight, not the skylight, moonroof. Duh. We're not in a house, right? In a moonroof. And he's looking up, right? He's looking up, and he tells his parents, like, hey, listen, there is this craft above my head. And he sees it. And he starts describing what he sees. So the mother pulls out her phone and goes, click, 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 starts taking pictures of it and looks at the camera and says, is this what you're seeing? He goes, not at all. Something completely different. And so what I'm trying to tell everybody here again is that we have created entire fields of research based upon archetypes that may not even be real. They may actually be projections or manipulations of our perception to where when we interact with them, this is all throughout the literature and case studies. It's dear Aunt Edna until it's not. And you realize that no, whatever that is has weaponized some form of a learning matrix to don that archetype, to wear that mask in front of us. And at the time of the phenomenon's choosing, it could pull the mask off. And now we're entertaining something we didn't even know existed. Now we'll circle back to the incubi cases where these experiencers were being asked, you believe you copulated with an entity? Yes, I did. Who do you believe it was? I believed it was my husband. Until it wasn't. And then once that archetype, that mask got pulled off, they got to the root of the issue. There was no way the church could quantify it. Literally, they went back and said, okay, here's our list of rules, right? Okay, here's what was it? Was it fornication? Was it adultery? Oh, was it a human? Was it bestiality or was it a beast? What is it that's done this to you? And they had no explanation for it because, again, whatever this was, it transcended the microcosm of their experience. They were dealing, again, with these archetypes. Okay, yeah, it's horns and hooves. But for the first time in documented demonic history, it was like, okay, but what is this exactly? How can a spirit leave secretions? How can a spirit procreate and impregnate? So that's where I am in the field, at least in my field necrometics.
Yeah, because I want to talk about that specifically, about the secretions and maybe why it's doing what it's doing. But just to go back for a second about what the thing is. So do you not think it's possible for us to even know what it truly is, or what form it truly, what is its core like form? You know what I mean? Because there's so many things, and you see about this a lot when people will do psychedelic experiences or even near-death experiences, and sometimes they come in contact with these various things. It's a little frustrating on my side because it's like, man, what can you trust? And I hear you saying that you really can't trust anything. Because your perceptions, like, we're here to survive, hunt, you know what I mean? Even what we see, people who are proponents of, oh, if you do psychedelics or whatever, you're seeing really what's reality. You're not seeing, this facade that's in front of us, So how do you feel about those things? Can we ever really know what it is, or should we not even be looking?
So I think we should be looking. I think that this goes back to the studying of consciousness and reality itself, but there are aspects of the phenomenon that are cross-cultural and interreligious, where once all of these archetypes are pulled away, you still have the same bloody footprints in the snow. And I can go through those parts as well for everybody who wants to kind of write this stuff down. Number one, whatever these beings are, they do use sigils. I know that. Other researchers in the UK know that. Our government knows that. Kenneth Grant knew that. Okay? So they do use sigils. And this is where, again, early demonologists really failed to comprehend what sigils were. You know, we have Bernard of Gordon, we have a couple others in back in the day, not now, obviously, but, you know, in the 1600s and stuff, where they had aspects of the phenomenon correct. But again, they're projecting a lot of antiquated dogma on it, right? Okay, if it's sigils, it has to be demonic. All right, let's go there, right? And so, but even now, and I guess this is what I'm saying, is even now in the 21st century, we're coming out with cases of practitioners projecting their consciousness from one individual to something else, from their own mind to something else. In that biofield is actually carving sigils into people. And so we're not demonic. We're consciousness, right? We are mortals. And so this gets back to the question of what were they dealing with? And so with the presence of sigils, again, for those who are interested, his name is Austin Osman Spar. And his theory on sigilization is fascinating to me, where he talks about that the body will absorb the sigils, activate them, and then reject them and purge itself once the ritual is fulfilled. And so that's when I started realizing that, okay, again, what can inseminate a woman, and also what can create sigils underneath the eyelids? What's the whole purpose of that?
Mm-hmm.
What's the whole goal in game? That's when I came to the conclusion that we're dealing with, we're practitioners of the occult through and through, high initiates, and that even a lot of what we're dealing with in the paranormal field has to do with occultists. And there's even evidence right now with other people, the Skywatcher and some other groups in the government, that they're understanding that too, and that the only way they're able to contact the phenomenon is through occult ritual. And so my point here, again, let me break this down. Okay, so again, we're dealing with sigilization, or what I've termed biosigilization. In the 1970s, the USSR, they were performing experiments with practitioners, and so they were in a controlled environment. You've probably heard this if you're familiar with my work. Mm-hmm. Maybe, hopefully not. Anyways, they're practicing, right? They're experimenting with these practitioners. Okay, we're going to place a piece of photograph paper, blank paper, inside an envelope, tape it to your head. All right, what do you want me to do? I want you to project your consciousness into this paper. Well, how can energy become matter? Well, we're going to test that theory. With consciousness, it can. And so here they are. Okay, here's the symbols we want you to carve into the paper. And boom, boom, boom. At the end of the experiment, lights are turned on, the controls are turned off. They pull out the piece of paper from left to right. Every symbol was there.
Yes.
So then the next stage was, okay, in a controlled environment, right, in the same laboratory, we were going to take that piece of paper out of the envelope, put it across the room from you. Same methodology. Go. The practitioner goes through the ritual, right? Next thing you know, this is fascinating, is that between the practitioner and the envelope, a biofield began to manifest in the room. Now, we've seen this in hauntings and after abductions, but I think that the research being done is starting to get to the point of it, where in this biofield, there are corpuscular balls of light that are flickering on and off, and it's moving across the room, and then it slowly descends down like a smoky apparition onto the envelope. All right, experiment's over. Controls are off. Lights are on. Let's go see. Pull out the paper from left to right. The same symbols.
Jeez.
So my point being is that we're seeing that same phenomenon in hauntings, possessions, and in abductions. I've worked with one of the late Dr. Carter Turner's cases, the son whose mother claimed to have been abducted. Here we go again, perception management. Claimed to have been abducted by aliens. That was her experience. But, and what people saw outside of that encounter really told the whole story. And so that's the point I'm getting to, one of them. The first of which is what they saw is different than what she experienced. Boom. Right? And so here we go. They're sitting down watching television. Mother's laying down sleeping. And this biofield manifests in the room. It starts moving towards the mother. And they don't know what to do with this. They have no idea what kind of occult practices and experiments are going on. They just know that shouldn't be here. Suddenly it descends down upon the mother. About an hour later, she wakes up claiming to have been abducted by aliens. The problem is, my new friend, she was covered head to toe with sigils. So watch this. The intent, again, sigils themselves are designed to embody the intentions of the practitioner. So the intentions and consciousness actually inform the information that becomes matter. So the reason she experienced aliens is because that's what the practitioner wanted her to experience. It's built in to the archetype, but even behind the archetype, again, right? These are present. Kenneth Grant knew that. Crowley knew that. We know that in the field. And this is why early demonologists said, well, these have to be demons. I don't believe that to be the case. I believe what we're dealing with are occultists. They are high initiates in that there are portions of our reality that they do, in fact, control.
So regarding the succubi and that kind of the sigils, and I guess when you kind of touched on it, is why they're doing it. What is the purpose of them trying to cross that, I guess, from the spirit, supernatural realm, whatever label you want to put on it, into the physical kind of embodiment of human beings and the world we live?
Yeah, well, this goes back to, again, another argument I have in demonology, where possession itself was kind of framed by the Vatican, to where the only possessions they were willing to talk about were the possessions that they could exercise. Anything outside of their peripheral vision didn't exist, right? It was not a part of our literature. What do we do with these cases? And so, yeah, I believe that's the case. It's difficult to, again, discuss these cases without understanding the pathology of possession before it was hijacked by religion. So I'm going to go to James Frazier's book on anthropology called The Golden Bow, where James Frazier details the practices of occultists in antiquity, who, if they were mortally wounded, they would dispossess their own body and possess someone else. So that wasn't an act of just survival, but it was an act of self-replication. I want to survive this, but my body's going to die. So the only way to live on and replicate my existence in this dimension is to have a new body. And so that was the nature of possession. Even if I can go and kind of ramble in a way, even in biblical antiquity, in the Old Testament, the first mention of possession in terms of a demon or unclean spirit was what's called the open vessel law, right? Where these individuals were afraid, like it comes from the Levitical priesthood, where if you go into a household and there's a dead person, if there's a corpse in there, you become unclean by being virtue in the presence of a dead person. And so if that was the case, if you knew there was a corpse in your house, you would go to an open vessel where they kept all their food, like clay pots. They would place a lid on it because they did not want the corpse to pollute that open vessel. And so in their demonology, they said, okay, just as that open vessel can become polluted by the uncleanness of that corpse, you and I can be the open vessel that can be polluted by that unclean spirit. Where's the spirit coming from? It's consciousness. It comes from that corpse. And so they went through the whole ritual of exorcism. And so my point again is that I had to do a lot of deconstruction regarding demonology before I even had the ability to approach the phenomenon. But once I did, all of the connections, or at least in my career, they were made available. Number one, to your question, number one, the purpose of the impregnation of the incubus, right, and the implantation of its consciousness was self-replication. When you're carving, again, that's what they kept wrestling with. Well, what kind of a spirit could impregnate? It's not a spirit. It's a practitioner. That's why it's employing sigils and secretions at the same time. They didn't understand that. And so even if we get into dream demonology, we have to go through various aspects of the same ritual. Dream demons, entities that induce the woman into a dreamlike state. Okay, let's check. I thought that's a demon. It's a ritual, right? They hover directly over the body. Again, these are occult practices. And so finally, I went through like virtually 6 years of just incubi research to come to one conclusion, that this was one ritual being performed. It's called the Ultimate Black Mass and the Red Rite combined together into one ritual. And that was the practitioner, before he dies, he will inseminate a woman with a fetus. He will remove himself from that body, possess that fetus, and live through that body and exist.
Man.
This is why they didn't understand. Now, in order for that to happen, mind you, that individual had to understand how to project its consciousness out of its body, out of their body. Well, that's what we're learning to do right now in the government.
So do you, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not tracking this correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So you believe that what we see as the phenomenon, is it almost like it was once a human or something resembling that, and now it's learned to go into this consciousness realm, and now it's just basically moving itself through what we perceive as time, jumping from one vessel to the next? And is this what's the distinction between, I guess, the human practitioners and then whatever the source of this power is, or are they just hijacking consciousness and perverting it?
I think it's all the above. Okay, so what I'm describing now, specifically within demonology, is the fact that early demonologists confused practitioners with demons. And so these are practitioners still. They are human, but there's an aspect of them that's also formerly human, right? Once you're out of your body, you take on characteristics. Fascinating stuff. And we can get on another show if whatever. But my point here is, yes. So what I'm dealing with essentially is that there is an overarching proto-intelligence. It's an energy field. And that whatever these beings are, I believe are formerly human, and that they've been learning from it and working with it. So they're not performing rituals just to themselves. They're performing rituals to something else that's affording them these abilities. And so I've turned that, again, this is necronetics, this is the field I'm creating. But what we're dealing with essentially is a group of occultists that are performing these rituals, and they're working with another form of consciousness above them that I call the proto-intelligence.
Now, is that proto-intelligence in your mind what we would perceive? Because perception is a funny thing, and I, you hear people talk about this, where like, does the gazelle think a lion's evil? You know what I mean? Like, well, obviously from its point of view, of course it does, but you just think it's just trying to hunt and survive. So this proto-intelligence, would you prescribe the label or put a label on it as evil, or is it just a neutral thing that you can do whatever your desires, I guess?
So now we're getting into the current worldview in my life. So this goes back to something I said, that what we're dealing with, whatever that proto-intelligence is, it's either in control of all reality or it's in control of parts of it. That's non-negotiable, and a lot of people, like I grew up in evangelicalism, and a lot of people don't want to even touch on that. Because demonology, even the Collins elite, they only went as far as saying, okay, yeah, they can control our perception of reality. I don't believe that's the case at all. But if we admit that, then we have to go into, right, like, okay, if we're using the scientific method to prove the existence of a designer, then it's almost like there's another designer, right, that's hijacking that reality. And so now we're dealing with two presences, and one is too much. We should only have it. So it's really complicated. But let me, to make it, I guess, more palatable, the Collins elite didn't believe that at all. They believed the phenomenon was managing our perceptions of it, which to a degree it does. But now what we're discovering is that even by experiencing it has the ability to change our DNA. That's not a even some of the researchers I've been working with as of late, like Steve Mera, Steve's had cases where a husband and wife are arguing, and there is this figurine that's moving on the table. The husband gets mad, takes it, chucks it out the front door. It shatters into 1,000 pieces. 5 minutes later, he walks back in the living room, and it's back on the table, put back and together, goes outside, and there's nothing there. So within demonology specifically, the model was failing because nobody ever told the truth, right? It was either commercialized into, okay, I'm going to sell a bunch of t-shirts, right? And we're going to have case studies that are within our peripheral. We're never going to have demonic pregnancies because that won't sell tickets. We can't talk about that. You know what I mean? That's too real. And then on the other side of it, it's like, well, is this even a demon? How can it inseminate a woman? What's actually going on here? And so what we're trapped in now is language, semantics, horns and hooves. And to my point is that, yes, whatever we're dealing with is controlling our perception of it to a degree. But at the base note of it all, when the mask is pulled off, you have arguments for both sides, right? I think both sides, again, the extraterrestrial, alien, interdimensional, and demonic, there's something to all of that, right? But again, I do believe that a lot of this is the phenomenon lying to us.
And I think maybe we talked about this a little bit before we started, is this kind of my struggle with faith, religion, because what you're saying makes a lot of sense, especially when you encapsulate all these different things that are going on from UFOs and everything else, and what consciousness studies are showing, and people who go into the other realm and have seen behind the veil kind of thing. And like they say a lot of these same things. But for me, it's like, I get kind of like, man, like where does God fit into all that? You know what I mean? Like if I personally, I've moved more toward kind of like the idealism. I talked to Bernardo Kashup a while ago, and he had it was very just elegant in how it works with like science and everything else in terms of consciousness is the base layer of reality. Everything comes from that. And a lot of people call that God. But when you're talking about this proto-intelligence, these entities hijacking that, like what the actual source is of what we're talking about here. And are we labeling that God? And is it all good? Is it all powerful? Because like when you go through life, it doesn't feel that way. And with this, it actually adds another layer of like, man, this is,
oh my God.
Like talk about a spiritual war. Like this is like way beyond, this is like that on steroids.
Oh, it's way beyond, way beyond. There have been nights where I've sat alone and just pondered reality and just like my position in this.
It keeps me awake. It honestly does. Like I'll stay up and like losing my dad, and I'm like, man, why are we here? Just to start with that question, then you just go down a rabbit hole of like, what?
Well, yeah, and that's it's not without pain and suffering, but these are the bigger questions. That's what I realized in demonology. Like, okay, these questions aren't even answers. There's no, they're even questions. Rather, they're just. Again, it seems like the phenomenon is projecting not just fear and terror, but it's projecting narratives within the field. And those aren't even worth asking. Like, okay, like for instance, what does a demon look like in the Old Testament? What is that? Right? Because there were deities that weren't really demons. There were demigods that weren't really demons. And what you start to realize is that they classified anything that was outside of their own theology as demonic up until a certain point. And then they would kind of reincorporate that into their theology. And that's one of my biggest arguments with the Nephilim research. It's like, okay, what is that? What's fallen about an angel? What's angelic about the fallen? Why is it that the term Nephilim was first described in antiquity as men who died? They fell. They're fell in death. And so, and you get into the Rephaim and Ugaritic literature. Again, these were deceased ancestors who were deified upon death. That became the Rephaim in biblical antiquity. And so that's why scholars could never really define it. It's Rephaim. Yeah, they're deceased, but they're also giants. And so finally you see the hybrid emerging, where the reason it was defined as both the body and consciousness was because we were dealing with beings that were replicating their own life form through new bodies. And they couldn't. It's hard to understand. And that's what I'm dealing right now with necronetics. But to your point, yes, the questions I'm asking now are not the same questions I've asked myself through the years. Because once you realize that a lot of this is consciousness, even some of the beings that our practitioners within the government were in contact with, like when people say that the Collins elite were against remote viewing, that's not really true. They were mad because our people were remote viewing entities. Literally, I'm going to project. Okay, here I am, boys. What's going on? And not realizing that after that, suddenly they were being remote viewed by the entities. Mm. So you literally have this kind of war of consciousness being waged, and they came out against it. And so my point here is that I realized that demonology, before it was redefined, recontextualized, was studying consciousness. And I believe right now that's where we are in the field. And I know I've watched some of your episodes. You have amazing people on your show. they've discussed the same thing where it just seems like it's consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the theories within demonology is that at least some of these demons are formerly human beings. And at times we've only interacted with them when they've been out of their bodies. And so now this gets back into the species within. Is it possible that the soul itself is a different species in the body it inhabits? If that's the case, then that would explain why Joe McMoneagle and other remote viewers, when they're out of their body projecting their consciousness, they have a different form entirely.
So you would think then, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, and I know a lot, there's a good chunk of our listeners and people who watch who are religious. People hold on to that because I think it makes some sort of sense and it gives them some sort of structure to go through life. Because if you don't, you can get into even into weird places mentally. Like, what does it all mean? Why am I, you start asking hard questions to day-to-day life hard to go through. So I'm not trying to shatter people's, everybody comes to that journey themselves. So would you say you have broken away from the traditional kind of like biblical God and this and the angels and demons and kind of that structure? Or is it just more loose in terms of, do you believe there's an all-powerful, all-good, loving creator behind all this? Or is it more just neutral, like an idealism perspective where it's just kind of anything that can happen will happen. The universe wants to experience itself.
I don't believe that at all. No, I do not subscribe to that. Whatever we're dealing with, again, I think that this is a conversation you and I had before we were recording. I believe that the correct model of the phenomenon is demonic. I just believe that the demonic and demonology has been hijacked by people who literally do not know anything about demonology. I have a good friend of mine, and this is something that we have been discussing as of late, she has a doctorate of divinity. Her doctoral thesis was on evil spirits. So when we're talking, she has, obviously she's very, very, very educated. And so we're talking about stuff. And I'm like, okay, what do you think about this? You cannot, again, the face of demonology today, you cannot take her and place her in that conversation because she would have no frame of reference. All we know, again, this is a conversation I've had with people, is like a handful of people that were on television that had 2 or 3 cases that were good. I'm not discounting them. I'm saying in terms of historical demonology, right? We don't have that model. We don't have that research. We don't have that academic prowess right now in the paranormal field. It's because of that when people say they hear of demonology, they think of certain people, right? And literally, it's mainly Catholic, nothing wrong with that. But demonology is interreligious, cross-cultural. And so my point is, yes, my perspective is it's the correct model of the phenomenon, at least the darker aspects is demonic. But again, what is a demon? Mm-hmm. And I've actually come face to face with that symptom within the field where I had a case, again, it was an Incubus case where an entity was grooming a wife. And I get to his house and he's complaining, he's really, really sad. He's like, I don't know what to do, Nathaniel. I'm like, I obviously understand that. Tell me a little bit of what's going on. He's like, he goes, this thing is crawling into bed at night. He's like, we're sleeping in bed. And he said, I can see the imprints of it moving the bed frame, crawling into bed with us. And he's like, it'll start twirling my wife's hair. And he said, I could feel it rubbing against my feet.
That's creepy.
He said, Nathaniel, I don't know what to do. Now, here's the problem. Because T. Whitten Davies is not on television or his work is not being published, right, where people have access to it. It's not Bernard of Gordon. It's not Sinistra of Amino, right? And I've had conversations with individuals where it's like 2 seconds or less. It's like, oh my God. Like demonology doesn't have a chance. He looks at me, he goes, I can't fight something I can't see. He's like, I'm a veteran. He's like, I've been to battle before. He's like, I think I'm an alpha. I'm pretty sure I am. He's like, I can't fight something I can't see and I don't know what to do. So COVID took place. So I was unable to visit him for about 2 or 3 months. I get a phone call. So-and-so woke up with Bell's palsy. Half his face is paralyzed. I said, oh no. What did you do? Well, I was watching my favorite TV show. Oh, okay. What do you mean? Well, they were performing the rite of provocation. And so I provoked it through the rite of provocation. That's what I'm talking about. It's the commercialization of an entire field that is not informed. And my point being is there are real life consequences to that, not just in our model of the phenomenon where people say, okay, yeah, it's horns and hooves. Okay. But the only horned and hooved entity, right, in the Bible, it's in Revelation, it's a dragon that comes out of the water. We're not seeing dragons coming out of water. We're not, right? We're seeing the archetype of whatever demonology has projected onto the phenomenon. The phenomenon says, hey, I'll be that. Thank you. Mask down. Mask down. And it gets to a point, again, even with Diana Pasuka's research, and she has brought this to the fore, which I think is really, really meaningful. I'm going to kind of piggyback on this, where she's talking about how, like, the Vatican sometimes they would encounter an entity and they didn't know what to make of it. Right? It would follow. Oh, it doesn't really have wings or anything. Okay, we're just going to say it's an angel, and it wasn't. Something else. Father Sinistro encountered that again. Right? It was a demon. That's weird. Like, doesn't seem like it. It seems like it had a body. Right? And it seemed like it left secretions. It was performing sex magic and chaos magic on this experiencer. Even then, Sinistro again on the dirt road. He came back from dinner. And here comes an entity walking out of the forest. Here he comes. I don't know what that is. Here's a cross. Here's holy water. Right? Here are some prayers. Here's a rosary. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the entity just looking at him. And Sinistrari was dealing with cognitive dissonance. What do I make of this? What are you?
That's a really good point, because I wanted to ask you that. So we're talking about what is the source there, and despite this maybe evil thing that's happening, and praying to God, invoking Jesus. Like, you hear a lot of people say, well, I invoked Jesus and it stopped. Now, is that just being said by religious people who kind of want it to be the case? Or because, like you just said there, holy water didn't work and things didn't work. Can that stuff still have an effect? Does it have an effect? Can people go, if they're getting these kind of things happening to them, does the rite of exorcism still work? I mean, because you're right. You're talking about things where they know how to handle it and it works. And still, when I speak to exorcists, it's like, it's very difficult. It's not a cut and dry thing like some people make it out to be.
God.
So now, is this stuff resistant to that sometimes? Or because it's like, it feels so convoluted in terms of like what exactly you're dealing with at that moment, even if it's branching off from that primary source.
Right.
How do you make of the religious stuff involved?
Again, I think that these are archetypes. These are manifestations that may or may not be real. Like, okay, what do I mean by that? One of the cases that people like to ignore when they push that narrative is Ted Rice's case, where Ted Rice was a child and his conscious memory could only collect a certain amount of events. Like, he's like, I was with my grandmother, spend the night with her. In the middle of the night, we hear a disembodied voice begin to call our names and speak to us. And he's like, I was hiding under the bed or something, under the covers, crying my eyes out, and my grandmother was rebuking it. And the next day, and this is what he remembered consciously, he's like, yeah, he goes, the next day I asked grandma, like, what was it? Oh, that was the devil, son. I rebuked it. That's what it allowed us to remember. It's what allowed him to remember, at least. And then fast forward 50 years, he starts to have post-traumatic stress disorder in his life. He's literally breaking down. He doesn't understand. He's having nightmares. He's going through a lot of bad things in life. And so he contacts somebody that gets a hold of Dr. Carla Turner, Barbara Bartholic. They put him into, hypnosis, memory regression. And here's what the phenomenon suppressed. You ready? They were abducted, him and his grandmother. And there was an entity that was trying to do things to her. And they did. They would try to do things to him. She got in the middle, in between the entity and Ted, and said, the Lord rebuke you. I rebuke you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Those are twofold. Two different rebukes, varying in biblical literacy. Lord rebuke you was the most accurate one. She mentioned them twice, two different versions. You're going to go to hell. It's what, go back to hell where you come from. That's what she said. And it laughed and said, there is no hell. And because of what you've done right now, I'm going to put something in your head and you're going to die. You've lost your life because of this. Just remember, this is why.
Jeez.
Next morning, parents come to pick Ted up. Let's go to lunch, Grandma. Okay, get in the back of the car. She has an aneurysm in the head and dies. I brought that case to these researchers, and here's what they said. That's a lie. Of course it is. Oh, it's a lie. Never happened. I don't believe it. So again, I'm a person. I'm not. I had to grow out of the dogma and grow into the data. But again, I do believe that the correct model is demonic. But what is demonic? We have to go back in time, right, before it was decontextualized by people who just thought, you know what, this will sell more tickets. We can sell this. We don't want to terrify them too much, right? Underlying the pathology of the phenomenon, all the archetypes, there is something that is pervasive. There's a learning matrix, okay? Even like I've had a case before where a lady was abducted by aliens, but as a kid, but whenever they would manifest, it would manifest to her in her favorite cartoon, as her favorite cartoon, her favorite comic book character. That's the matrix. That's the incarnation of an archetype. And so she said that Nathaniel, she goes, for years went by, they didn't show up. They show up again. Watch this. Still within that matrix, that learning matrix, that program. They never evolved. She evolved. She matured. She no longer read those comic books, no longer watched those cartoons. And so what happened, and this is what we're doing in the field of research that I'm working with, is we're catching the phenomenon in so many lies that now we're testing its ability to adapt to our perception and our beliefs. How long is it going to take you to realize I don't believe in that?
Because that goes to the point you mentioned about how it's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but targeting people. Like it has does it have a profile that is the kind of person it would go after? Because not everybody experiences this. Some people go through life completely oblivious to anything kind of on that side. Like my mom's had some weird experiences. She's not like a crazy lady or anything. Subtle things that I've never had. Now, does this thing target specific people when like you talk about that case that,
Yes, I've had many cases in my career where specifically women, starts out young. And a lot of times they don't understand what it is, right? It'll present itself as an alien, an extraterrestrial, or a guide. And later on in life, they'll realize that, there have been really bad things happening to them, and they'll come to me. And so by the time they come to me, it's usually the husband contacting me on their behalf, right? Like, hey, I don't want you to think my wife's crazy or anything. And I'm like, certainly not. But that's usually the kind of methodology. And but once we get down to it, it's usually, okay, does your family have any experience with the occult? Any? And I've had people tell me, no, they don't. Promise you, Nathaniel. Never. Never once. Next day, I'll get an email. Yeah, it was my great-grandfather. So what's happening, at least to my knowledge, is that some of these beings have like a symbiotic relationship with people down the back of the bloodline. And it stalks the bloodline looking for somebody else. And then it starts knocking on their door. And they're like, well, I don't even know what this is. Why me? Because it's not random. It's stalking the bloodline. I'm going to say this, and this is mind-blowing to me. No pun intended once you hear it. But Dr. Gary Nolan is coming out with research where, again, when I'm talking about perception management, where the phenomenon will project reality or perception of reality on us, I should say, it's affecting a part of our brain, and now it's being scarred. And so they're doing brain scans on these experiencers, and they all have the same scarification on that particular part of the brain because that's what the phenomenon is affecting. Perception management. Go and watch this. Now what we're questioning is whether or not the phenomenon is actually targeting that experiencer or targeting the bloodline. Because what's happening is, we'll do brain scans on this individual. Have you had an experience? Yes. Okay. What about this one? The son. I've had an experience. Okay. We'll go to the third generation who's never experienced the phenomenon, and they'll still have the scarification on their brain.
Wow.
So my point here, again, is that, deconstruction. is where, yeah, I believed the phenomenon was targeting me. May not be the case. It might be targeting a grandchild from mine, right? Another generation coming from me, and it's trying to change my bloodline, targeting a single individual.
Man.
So what we're dealing with, again, these do not seem to be unclean spirits. These do not seem to be just apparitions, right, that pass through a wall and knock on our windows at night and give us nightmares. Mm-mm. Those seem to be symptoms of a much larger phenomenon. And whatever that is willing to play into that hand, right? Yeah, the sigils would be present because that's the true model of the demonic, right? That's the true historical model of it. But again, we don't, not you and I, but people don't want to talk about that because it forces them to have conversations that which they have no knowledge of. They're still stuck in like, okay, well, I have these 2-3 people I know, and they had one good case that was fascinating, which I'm not discounting that. What I'm saying, though, is the phenomenon has hijacked demonology, recontextualized it, separated it from its source, antiquity, and said, okay, by the way, this is what it is. This is who I'll be. So much so. I have a good friend of mine who's another host of a show, and I was presenting this theory to him. And he's like, oh my God, this is incredible. So he starts telling me about a case that he went on one day. And he's like, he goes, we've been having these instances, but we didn't realize what was going on. Because again, we compartmentalize it. Oh yeah, it's separate entities, separate phenomena. He said, we're in a haunted house. The homeowners were scratched, pushed downstairs, balls of light, apparitions. It's a demonic haunting. Said, okay. All right. What'd you do? He goes, we called a priest. The local priest comes in and he asks the specific question, which room is the most haunted? Where's the activity at the most? It's in this room. So he goes, okay, I've got a vial of holy water. I'm going to place it in the middle of the room and you're going to see what happens. Okay, cool. So he does it. And he's like, Nathaniel, we watched as the phenomenon began to siphon all the holy water out of the vial until it just falls over because it was empty.
Jeez.
So if there is a pathology, it baits us with archetypes, right? I'm the guide. I'm the ghost. I'm a deceased scientist. In the school experiment, I'm a spirit team, right? And then once it gets us through these programs of consent, oh, I believe that. Okay, how much do you believe it? Right? Okay, cool. We'll move on to the next stage. That's what the skull experiment gave us, was the realization that these were not real intelligences. These were projections, right? These were emanations of whatever this phenomenon is. And so the problem that we're having is that within these programs and learning matrix is that when we're interfacing with the phenomenon, or whatever these beings are, we're not fighting for minutes of consent and free will. We're fighting for seconds of free will. That has been proven through Project Doorway and the Phenomenon Project with Steve Barry Fitzgerald, where in antiquity and demonology, we were having experiencers who would say, even today, where they would interface with whatever this entity was, but within a matter of seconds, they would be induced to a dreamlike state or a trance, a stupor. And then the phenomenon would do whatever it wants to do to them. Whatever it wants to do to them. And then it lifts that stupor off of them. They're still fuzzy and they're foggy brain and they're looking around going, I don't even know what that was. Like for the Sinister of Amino's case, I don't even know what that was. We knew that was happening. We did not have the scientific proof. So what Barry Fitzgerald and Steve Mayer have brought to the table is that they went out and done CE5 experiments with CE5 practitioners. I want to interface with the phenomenon. Love and light. And they had brainwave monitoring units on the heads of these practitioners. See, there are theories, and there's field work. And I was doing field work. I got back into literature. I'm going to be going back to the field work because, again, if the theory is right, we have to try it. Mm-hmm. So here's the love and light aspect of it. With the CE5 movement, our intentions with the phenomenon determines their intentions with us. It's all about intention. No. These people went out Barry Fitzgerald, Steve Merrill went out with these practitioners and said, okay, do your CE5 thing. Okay, we're going to go through the steps. All right, do you mind if we monitor your brainwave activity? Not at all. My intentions with it will determine its intentions with me. All right, game on. Boop. Do your thing. Go through the ritual. Go through the process, the protocols. Here comes the phenomenon. It incarnates in the sky. And they're watching the brainwaves. Okay, here we go. Within 20 seconds, it induced that experiencer into a theta brainwave by theta or theta. It's trance-like brain activity.
Mm-hmm.
They were induced into a trance. And can I say this? And I'll shut up after this. But listen, it's not just CE5. It's not just incubi literature. It's not just that experiencer, right? The Dr. Clark Turner case, right? Where it's hovering over her head and she's thinking, okay, this has got to be an alien. Something entirely different. She woke up with sigils. That wasn't an extraterrestrial alien. Just like that, I mentioned earlier, Gary Nolan's case in France. The child looks up and within 20 seconds, he sees something. But what they captured on camera was completely different than what he saw. They put him into a trance. In this again, once we get down to the footnotes of history and all of the phenomena, it's called phenomenology, we see that there are underlying aspects of it that have never changed. The mask has changed. But what it's doing, again, it replicates it and it seeks to be worshipped. It's all the same thing.
That's wild. Yeah, because you hear a lot about the CE5 stuff, and then also the meditation things when you trying to get down in touch with consciousness and stuff, and then obviously the psychedelic stuff. So in your opinion, is that all dangerous and people should be staying away from that stuff? Now, I know there's varying levels of meditation and things, but you hear about Diana Pasulka. I saw you referenced her in something else, and I went and found the clip on one of her interviews. I think it was the Sean Ryan podcast, when she's talking about how people in her sphere, the real whistleblowers aren't coming out because they're afraid. And they don't even want to talk about it because of what it really they think it is, and people are leaning more toward demons, whatever definition that holds. But you think people should stay away because some people have great experiences obviously on some of these things. It changes their life and all this other stuff. How do you feel? What is the interaction there, or do you think some people can access this stuff and escape without any kind of negative attention, or is it all eventually going to get to that point where they're like a parasite against you?
I don't base myself off of one or two, or base my theory on one or two experiences or experiencers. And that's what a lot of these people are doing, right? I had a great experience with it. And I've even had like conversations with them where it's like, okay, so you believe the phenomenon is all love and light? Of course it was, because that was what it represented to them, right? And so I don't want to discount their experience, but I don't also want to take that and use that to define everything. I will say that we don't know what they are. We do not know how much control they have over us. I can tell you with a surety that at least the darker aspects of it, they're doing the same things to the same people. And again, if we're not, first of all, we don't even understand what's going on here. We don't. We don't even know what consciousness is. And so when people, it's laughable. Well, they're trying to raise our consciousness. Well, what is that? Oh, I have no idea. Then why don't you have a seat, order some French fries, some chicken nuggets, right? And we'll have that conversation later on when we define, right? It was always annoying. Like, all right, sell a t-shirt, right? We're raising our consciousness. Well, what is that? It's not volume. It's not money, it's not like you're raising a fund, it's, I'm going to raise it and lower it.
Yeah.
But let me get back to your point about Diana Pasulka. I watched an interview with her where she said that the real whistleblowers are still stuck in the demon versus angel hypothesis. But you know who the real whistleblowers are? And I've had conversations with some of them. They're academics and they're aerospace engineers. Okay? The academics are they're religious scholars. Right? Even Jacques Vallée, okay? Yeah, even Gary Nolan with Diana Pasulka. If we were doing this research 100 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago, we'd be talking about demons and angels. Why? Because it's not just because of the language. It's because they're realizing that this phenomenon employs sigils. And they're tied to the real, correct model of demonology that's backed up through books like this, Disembodied Souls, right? Here's another one for bibliophiles, Incubi, This is Father Sinister Avino. That's where they're coming from, right? They're not coming from just the stuff that we see in pop culture and on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so fascinating to me, my friends, because when she says, oh, yeah, the real whistleblowers, they're not the ones we're seeing. Wait a minute. What makes one a real whistleblower?
Mm-hmm.
It's because their research is probably deeper. It's more authentic. It's not just literature, right? It's people like the Collins elite who are physicists, who have their whole worldview shattered, right? Let me put it this way. I had a conversation not too long ago with a ufologist who grew up in a very academic household. And this individual told me they were virtually, in their words, they were catatonic after coming to a realization within ufology. But this individual told me, Nathaniel, I come from a very materialist, scientific background. I got into ufology because I wanted to really study extraterrestrials. I love science. I love just the whole aspect of approaching it, not non-dogmatic and just, whatever, scientifically based. And I said, well, why am I, what are you talking to me? Like, you're way more successful in this field than I am. Like, what can I do for you? This individual said, well, I was invited to a conference. I spoke at the conference. Afterwards, I was allowed to go and have dinner with these ufologists. And again, operating under the veil of extraterrestrial. And I said, okay, then what happened? This individual said, when I got to the location, it was somebody's house. The host, who is a huge ufologist, showed this individual their altar. I said, what? Yeah. Wait a minute. So at the conference, it's extraterrestrial. But in your home,
that's crazy.
What are we dealing with here? And this individual told me, literally, their words, the conversation was not at all what I thought it was going to be about. And I felt like I was being initiated into some mystery school, that all of this was just to get me into the fold. And then once I had gotten there, it was, oh, by the way, you kind of get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not actually, you kind of get it. They're wink, wink. Yeah, here's my altar then. Now, this is, again, are they demonic or all this? We're somewhere in the middle with this. The more probable model would be that it's the ultra-terrestrial model of John Keel's. When we're looking at the undergirding, I guess, pathology here, what we do know for sure is that they respond to altars. They respond to high places, groves, as they're called in antiquity. They do perform ritual magic on people. They do perform the same, again, it's called the ultimate black mass on experiencers. Impregnation, the missing fetus syndrome. Mind you, in the correct understanding, at least the historical model of demonology, the first hybrid was not David Jacobs' hybrids, by the way. And that's not, I'm saying, I love his work. What I'm saying is, again, when people say, oh, they're not demonic, okay, what do you mean? Okay, in possession, the pathology changed from possession to pregnancy. I was never taught that. Where's that being taught at Paracons? Never taught. Why? Because the phenomenon is propping up one version of it. Right? Oh, sure, it's demonic, but not your kind. It's got to be this new thing. No. See, in the 16th century, the incubus that was impregnating people began possessing them too. And so in the 16th century, it's called the debug phenomenon in Jewish folklore, where you had cases just like the incubus, where the women are being induced into dreamlike states. They're copulating with entities they think is a deceased husband, a dead boyfriend, a living husband, whatever. And then they wake up the next day with bruises and sigils on their skin. Next thing you know, they're possessed by consciousness that is not theirs. And then, as the phenomenon does, it mutates in its pathology. Now, they were not just possessed by the entities, they were pregnant by it. Now they're going to the exorcists in their villages and they're showing literal entities. Now, what do I mean by that? In the diaries of these exorcists, they believed that the entity had curled itself up in her womb to look like a fetus.
Man.
Watch this. This is the biggest game changer in all of demonology. And once they're interacting with the possessing entity, the entity didn't want to leave. I'm not leaving. This is my body. Who are you? I'm not leaving. I'm never leaving. And so they started doing exorcisms on these beings. And finally they realized that, wait a minute, what are these sigils all about? Is this an occultist? What's going on here, guys? That's when they asked the most profound question ever in demonology. Is she pregnant by the entity, or is she pregnant with it?
Mm.
And that's when you see the pathology of possession. It turned into pregnancy. Well, what is she pregnant with? What is she pregnant with? She's pregnant with the fetus it inseminated her with. So you have possession and pregnancy in the same host body. Mind you, my dear friend, they performed the Lavouche method, the thumb on the wrist. They found 2 pulses in the same body. She's pregnant. 2 heartbeats in the same body. She's pregnant. But now she's also possessed by an entity. Now, at the successful fulfillment of exorcism, this is crazy. The phenomenon took both the fetus and the consciousness at the same time. Heartbeat's gone. The second pulse is gone. She's no longer showing the next day. What happened? Well, again, because the phenomenon wants to recontextualize its presence within our world, we would call that the missing fetus syndrome in ufology. We just didn't know what we were looking at. Just happened to be gone.
Man.
No. So what my point here is, again, is that when I'm dealing with people that are like, okay, yeah, they're certainly not demons, I have to ask the question, what is your perception of demonic? Like, are you literate? Like, what do you know about it? And when I ask these questions, like, for instance, I had one guy that's been on like tons and tons of TV shows. And I said, okay, like, what do you think about the Nephilim? And he goes, what's that? The demonic is very, very much misunderstood. And the phenomenon has hijacked that aspect of it, right? Of course, there'll be horns and hooves until you start asking about sigils and biosigilization and secretions left by spirits. None of that makes sense because that's not really what the demon is.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you understand that concept, then we can go on to ask the larger questions of the phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Is it reality itself, or is it, managing our perceptions of it?
Mm-hmm.
So the sigils are present. They seem to be following Alston Osman Sparr's theory, where they will stay present on the body. Sometimes, I don't know if I told you this or not, but some of them are even subdermal.
Mm.
They're underneath skin. And so even ufologists, they would come in contact with these things. And they say, okay, they're symbols. But they didn't really have an academic background and had no background in the occult. So, of course, they're symbols. It's some other language. No, a lot of them are Goetic. A lot of them are Enochian. And a lot of them are caught. This is fascinating, too. Somewhere within the 3 stages of sigilization, right? And so if I was a researcher, like I say, if I was Bud Hopkins and I come out there and say, okay, I don't know what these are, but some of them are underneath the skin moving to the surface, right? Or some of them are on the skin moving inward. They're all in their own process of being absorbed by the body, activated by the body, and then being purged by the body. And so if I had no understanding of that, I would not understand what's going on with it because it's experience. Okay, whatever that is, let's mark it down in later days. But that's what it seems to be following. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I believe, again, that whatever we're dealing with, it has access to the soul, and that a lot of these are subdermal sigils that they may or may not be putting on our consciousness. And that's a whole nother aspect of it.
You hear a few voices in the UFO community now saying that the goal is to like harvest human souls. And it's not like really prevalent because you have 2 competing voices. I've spoken to another gentleman on the show, and I'm not trying to like say he's wrong or anything, because I don't know, but they're more toward the trying to connect with the UFO, the CE5 type of thing, and they want to like come into contact with it. What's crazy is like one of his first experiences though was a very paranormal experience, and like a woman coming in through a wall or something, and then it kind of turned into the UFO stuff. So do you buy into, and does that kind of go in with the missing baby syndrome or whatever it's called, where they're trying to steal your soul in a way, or soul harvesting? Is that?
So, well, this is very dark stuff here. I will say this, and I don't want to sensationalize, but at the same time, I don't want to disrespect. Number one, we're going to be researchers. We have to be researchers. If we're going to be experiencers, right? And you can be an experiencer too, but a lot of times people will try to do research of their own experience, and that's it. That's it. And I think that there is some degree of validity to that, you know. But I think that a lot of times people miss the bigger picture because they're not actively investigating. There's no boots on the ground, right? And a lot of people, and this is something that I had to deal with in my own career, are very intelligent, very, very intellectual, but have not actually been in investigation. Not one, not two, but a lot to say, okay, yeah, I had my initial experience, but I've had even more experiences since then, where I've caught the phenomenon lying to me, or I've realized maybe that initial experience was a little bit off, or my interpretation of it was off. That's first of all. Second of all, I had a case study again where the phenomenon was grooming a practitioner and telling him that they were his guides, and so he would go out of his body and he would meet them. They would give him prophecies, which a lot of these beings love to do. It's, oh, by the way, you know, and he would go back into his body. He'd dial up the politician he's working with and say, you know what, you're polling in a bad area. Why don't you poll in this demographic, and you know you'll win your election. They would pay him thousands of dollars to do this. And so he would go into his sessions. He'd have his ritual, and he'd leave his body. And one day he did that. And his son told me the story. It's fascinating. By the way, I have photographic evidence of this. And he goes, well, one day he's like, you know, Dad went to one of his sessions. He's like, I'm downstairs playing video games. I just thought, okay, it's another one of his deals, whatever. He said, next thing I know, my dad comes stumbling down the stairs. He's white as a ghost. He's incoherent. He's clutching his chest, and he's just crying his eyes out. And he's like, Nathaniel, my dad's a veteran. You know, he used to be a bouncer. He's like, he's probably the toughest man I've ever met in my life. He never cries. He's a very, very difficult dude as well. He's like, he's bawling his eyes out. He's like, well, he passes out. He has a massive heart attack. He's like, as they're working on him, they're tearing his shirt off. As they're tearing his shirt off, underneath the skin were sigils. Extraterrestrials wouldn't do that. That's weird. Mm-hmm. Sigils underneath the skin. And he's like, they looked like burns at first. There were red marks underneath the skin. He said, and they moved themselves. He said, we're watching this in real time. And they didn't know what to do with it. He's like, what is that? They're moving themselves all until they push themselves through the skin onto the surface. Now you could take your finger and rub them. You could feel them on the skin. I said, what?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. He said, because what happened was I did a lecture on skin anomalies. And so he kind of picked up that aspect of my work. He's like, okay, I got to tell Nathaniel about this. So we got some of the photographs of it. Yeah, they're sigils. It looks to be chaos magic. Matter of fact, one of the glyphs, I should say, is an Egyptian hieroglyphic. It's arching itself above the chest. Came from underneath the skin to the surface.
Jeez.
So underneath the skin, subdermal sigils. What? Uh-huh. And let's take it a step further. I'm working with researchers now that have clearances, and they're in the UK. And once I got to that depth of research, and not just that, was actually willing to talk about it, I got their attention. So now it's like, okay, we got to have a conversation. I'm like, uh-oh. Like, these are my heroes, right? I've been watching their work for years, and now I'm like doing Zoom calls with them. He sends me a picture of a handprint of one of these entities that's under the skin of the experience.
What?
It's pushing its hand underneath the skin, and you could see the handprint.
Jeez.
And yeah, they ran tests on it, and that image is under the skin. When people think that they're trying to raise our consciousness, no. These are, again, these are It's propaganda being propagated by an intelligence, by entities who lied to Ted Rice, right? Didn't even want Ted Rice to remember what happened, by the way. Forget the fact that it told the grandmother, we're going to kill you, and she did die. Didn't even want him to remember it. So one side says that was a lie. It's like, well, they never even told him. They didn't want to remember the lie. The whole point of it is for people to remember the lie. They didn't even want Ted to remember the lie. He did. So my point is this. There's a lot of questions we have to answer, and there's not a lot of people that are willing to come forward and say, okay, we've got problems. Even with Diana Pasuka saying, okay, Gary Nolan showed her some of the burns that these beings are placing on the bodies of practitioners. CE5 is what's happening. Okay, yeah, they're all living like until they burn you. And watch her language is really interesting to me. She's like, and once I saw the burns, wait a minute, the burns or the shape of the burns? I saw the burns. I went home and I prayed. Why'd you pray? What's she pointing back to? Hey, we're in this direction here. We thought we were dealing with this. We're over here. And again, this goes back to my point that when people say they're not demonic, what they're really saying is, okay, there's a model of the demonic I've been given, right? It might not even be accurate, but whatever, that's not them. No, if you go back to Bernard of Gordon, Sinister of Amino, okay, if you go back to even the occultists, Eliphas Levi, Bernard, all these individuals, okay, Abraham the Mage, Enochian magic, all of that is tied into this, and there's a reason why. And it's not just, okay, people say, okay, you're making it about religion. No, I'm not making it about religion. Albert Bender was building altars to them in his attic.
The idea that they want to be worshipped, and now the altars are showing up in people's homes when it's supposed to be an alien thing, but yet there's still worship going on. What do you make of that in terms of, trying to get back to into our physical existence, through like possession, or what we would classify as possession, the incubus, and now the worship aspect. Why do you think the worship aspect is there? And have you seen anything? Is it part of this, I guess, the ritual? Is it like the old stories of gods and goddesses over man and breeding with men? Is it kind of like, is there a shred of truth there to that?
100%. And yeah, that's the clearest pathology of all. And it's non-negotiable. It's like, okay, yeah. Even with the most documented experiencer right now, these orbs that he's leading people to, what is he telling you to do with them? Appreciate them. Love them. Tell them how beautiful they are. Thank you. Thank you. You're so beautiful. And somehow that empowers the phenomenon. But again, right, the phenomenon doesn't want us to talk about that because it wants altars. It wants worship. It wants to perform ritual magic. It wants to sigilize people, but it wants to be called something else. And Kenneth Grant told us this. He told us this. Kenneth Grant said, number one, they have sigils. We are in possession of their sigils that they're employing on people. Huh? Mm-hmm. Where's that at? Right? What do you mean by this, Kenneth? Again, he and this is something that I and others have been kind of watching for the last decade, is like we knew that there was going to be a shift in the terminology where it used to be extraterrestrial and alien. Now it's it's a little bit hairy. We'll call it something else, or even UFO, right? No, the UAPs. And so what we're looking at is the evolution of the phenomenon, right? So what I said before, where we're looking at the learning matrix, the amount of time the phenomenon takes to adjust itself to our perception. Mm-hmm. The base note of it, again, I want worship. I want altars. You can have conferences about us all being extraterrestrial. You could sell all the merch you want as long as you come to dinner and you see I have an altar to them. That scared me to death because I'm looking into the face at the time on a Zoom call with a ufologist who is very well known. And this individual was, in their words, I was catatonic for 3 months after that conversation. I didn't know if I wanted to continue being in the field. I just realized that this is not at all what I believed it was. Time out. Albert Bender, same thing. Same thing. These are UFOs, aliens, UFOs, aliens, UFOs, aliens, extraterrestrials. Builds an altar, phenomenon responds. Hi, here I am. In the 70s, the same thing happened. Group of scientists were studying the phenomenon from the scientific method, believing these beings to be extraterrestrials out there, not in here. Out there, not in here. They're out there. And so each and every one of them, they would go up to a certain point. They would write their thesis the night before they went to publish it for peer review. They were found dead, their own hands, one by one by one. And once the next day, people would gain access to their thesis, my friend. And the thesis read basically the same thing, each and every one of them. This is not extraterrestrial. It's ultra-terrestrial. This is not our world. It's theirs. They want worship. They want altars, but they're here. They're not out there. It's wild. The last one to show up deceased was Professor Rene Harding. And Professor Rene Harding, same thing happened, brother. Same thing, where he approached it just like this other ufologist I was in contact with. Yeah, this is all scientific. It's all good. No big deal here. And then he broke through all the archetypes. And he went, oh my God, I've got to tell the world. He goes to tell the world he's found deceased with a gun in his hand. And his family came out and said there's no way he would have done this. Someone did this to him. And they did this to him because he was about to tell the truth about the real model of the phenomenon. When they went to his funeral, Scott, they're all sitting down in within the pregnant silence, the funeral home. The back door opens, the front, and 6 very tall, pale men walk in. Wearing the same suits, spoke to people, shook their hands, all that. Sit down. Funeral goes on. After the funeral, as families do, they got together. They start talking. Wasn't it good to see Uncle Johnny here? Yeah, I was tell you what, I haven't seen him in 20 years. I couldn't believe he showed up. John would, or Rene Harding. Rene would have loved to see him. He would have loved that. By the way, who were those men that showed up right before the funeral started? I don't know who they were. So they get to talking. Nobody knew who they were. Wasn't a colleague, no friend of the family, no neighbors, nothing. Oh, what do they even look like? Well, I remember them looking like this. So they get on the camera. You have photos of them. Yeah. I knew I took. They're not even in photos. Not on camera and not on photos.
That's crazy.
So this is not our world. Whatever they are, they seek to be worshipped. They love altars. And it does appear to be that these are formerly human practitioners.
I heard you mention that about the people who came to the funeral and about how they're people who do this research and get too deep and peek too far behind the scenes end up with bad things happening to them. I know for a lot of people it sounds conspiratorial, but do you see that infiltrated into like the higher levels of society, like the government and different things? So there's the altars that are being formed, and maybe those things are getting access to those people and then controlling the narrative. And from a supernatural, not only a physical perspective of like the government visiting people, but like those entities in some way, shape, or form visiting people who are getting too close to that, like I think you're alluding to.
Oh, 100%.
So have you ever had that occur through your research, or do you? Go ahead.
Well, there are 2 things that usually happen. Either you're offered a lump sum amount of money for your research. I know 2 people who've experienced that, where and you have to get to a certain point in your research, and you have to be talking about something that's particularly on the nose, right, or over the target. And I've had that in friends of mine where, if it's not the government, it's something else. Well, yeah, or a think tank. We'll give you a certain amount of money. You'll never have to work again. But, and this is where some people in the field have been compromised. I know it to be true, where the conversation is accompanied with an NDA. Sign this, right? And we're going to offer you a certain amount of money, but here's the thing. You'll never have to work again. You can continue your research. No more interviews. No more lectures. No more conferences. You will report to us. You will give us your archive of information, case studies. We want all of your symbols, all of your sigils, all of your photographs, everything. But continue what you're doing. And so these people drop out. or they continue in the field and their narrative has changed. And I've seen this with my own eyes, right? Where now they were at little conferences, they're at huge conferences, and they've changed their story. Why? Because our government's got to them. Say this and this. Meanwhile, behind the closed doors, remember I told you about the altars versus, hey, t-shirts, we're selling tickets extra. Behind the scenes, we know they're not. These are altars. Just like that is exactly what these people are doing. Now, the second thing is that now this is something I have experienced where I was doing research in Babylonian magic, specifically fetal magic, because I do believe that these fetuses are being taken not just for replication, but for rituals. And there have been times in my life where I felt too close to the phenomenon, where, I'm not just experiencing it, I'm being experienced by it. And I realize it's seeping into my room. And I told my father, I called him, I said, I touched on something. I can't talk about it. I don't want to. But the phenomenon noticed, and I said, I can feel it. Within 2 hours, I got 2 different emails. It was a script, 2 different email addresses. Nathaniel, my guides wanted me to tell you that they'll be waiting for you when you die.
Jeez.
So that was one time. About a year and a half after that, I was out to lunch with my family, and I get a message from an experiencer that Dr. Collar Turner was working with, or had worked with. He's been following my research, and he works at a factory. And what he would do is he would play my interviews and lectures on like some kind of device, or, where his friends would be working, they could listen to it and all that. Well, he's asleep, I think it was, at night, and a voice comes to him and tells him, stop talking about Nathaniel Gillis. Stop mentioning his research. Leave him alone. And so he gets a hold of me, and he's frantic, like he's freaking out. Like, Nathaniel, I don't know what you're doing. You've got to pull back. They're noticing you. It's not just me. Barbara Bartholic was warned about this stuff too. Again, it's not really happening to the love and light people. Why? Because there's no need to threaten them. None at all. They're playing the game. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't realize it, they're playing the game. Barbara Bartholic is another person where they threatened her, you're due for an adjustment. And so sure enough, it was during the time of Thanksgiving. She's on the way to Thanksgiving with her husband. A car cuts her off, flips the car. Her husband, gone. The same thing with Dr. Collar Turner. You better stop doing this, is what they told her. You're also due for an adjustment. We'll figure some things out with you. They give her turbo cancer and gone. So, yeah, I mean, I have friends in the UK that are in the same kind of vein of research, and in the same night, one of them was visited by a gray standing at the foot of his bed. Same night, the next morning, his research partner calls him and said, did you have a visitation last night? Yeah, why? Because the security camera caught something on my end. Like, I'm talking about, let me put it this way. I'm talking about like the security camera, the company, calling the homeowner and saying, yeah, we have an issue with this. Apparently this trigger was tripped or something. And yeah, we got an alarm on our side. What is that? I have no idea. I walked to the house. There's nobody there. Sir, there's something standing right behind you.
Oh,
we see it. We're talking again. It's the demonic model, but more sinister in the sense that this is not our world. Whatever these beings are, that they exist outside of space-time, that we live in a construct. They can access this artificial habitat at any time and at will. But there is a symbiotic relationship. They want to be worshipped. They want sacrifices given to them. And like, we're not even asking those questions now. The questions now are like, okay, what kind of a species would want that from us? What is that? And the closest, I guess, model of that we have is 2. And this gets back into what's called the dead in their images. It's an academic paper. For those who are interested, just email me and I'll give it to you. It's called the dead in their images, where the dead in antiquity would seek an image to inhabit. And that was their first sarcophagi, right? Even in Egyptology, here's an image. Put the soul inside of it. There's an image. Yeah, the image, the sarcophagus, the coffin looked like the entity within it. That's the hybrid.
Yeah, I have to ask, because a lot of people are going to be like kind of freaked out by it. And when I spoke to one gentleman, and he was talking about alien abductions and how one lady tried to develop the mental fortitude or conscious and awareness to be able to hide herself from these things when they came to get her at night, and was able to hide for a little while, but then they ended up finding her. Because we're talking about these things, and should people stay away from, like, obviously the CE5s and where you're kind of like blindly going into these things thinking they're benevolent, but should you train yourself is there a way to protect yourself, basically, is what I'm asking, from these things if you're a target?
Yes and no. So first of all, my biggest, I guess, advice would be not to contact them. I worked with a lady who was trained by Stephen Greer. Trained. One of his very first clients. Okay, I want you to do this. So she's a big Stephen Greer fan. She's going through all the protocols, goes home, and a full-bodied apparition, not of an alien, manifests in her house. And now she's like, I don't know what to do. I can't get rid of this thing. See, that's the real CE5 experience on the part of the phenomenon. The phenomenon seeks to be seen so it can incarnate an archetype. We believe in the archetype. Seeks to be seen. It wants to interface with us. So the CE5 movement is defined by the idea that these are self-initiated experiences. That's not true. Who put the thought in your head to look that way? The phenomenon. That's the real manifestation, not the archetype. It's literally, look this way. And so my point is that if we really understand the data, again, I'm not talking about, I had an experience. I'm talking about, okay, go out and actually do the field work. When you do the field work, compare it to your experience. Not that you didn't experience it, not that that you're wrong or anything. Just do it. Do it. Mm-hmm. Look at the data set, because I'm telling you, it's not an accident. It's not a bug in the system. It's a feature. When we look at the phenomenon, it collapses itself into an archetype. It's the observer effect. And whatever that is, it's wearing it as a mask. Just like the kid in France, I see a craft. It was something completely different in the sky. Something was there, but it was wearing an archetype as a cloak. So we are often blinded by our own vision. I'm not denying we're not seeing. I'm not denying we're seeing. No, we saw something, but that may not even be what's actually there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, even with the Skywatcher, what they're realizing now is what they're actively witnessing with their eyes is not what they're capturing on camera. You know where we first heard that in phenomenology? We first heard that in hauntology, with Lloyd Auerbach's work, where they kept seeing, him and his team kept seeing an apparition. See what I mean? Phenomenon, projecting an archetype. Oh, it's a ghost. It's one of them ghost things. And then they thought to themselves, well, what is our camera picking up? They went to the camera. There was no apparition there. It was a ball of light. So what we're literally dealing with, so I'm trying to express to everybody, what we're dealing with is a phenomenon that would project a guide, an angel, demon, right? A ghost, apparition, alien. And at the end of the day, it could be none of them. And it's used those archetypes to infiltrate the field of the paranormal. And so we have Bigfoot coming out of orbs. Does Bigfoot exist? Or is it merely a program on the part of the phenomenon that the only way it can exist in our world is to be present with but absent from? What's present with us is the mask.
Yeah, because you hear about the people who always talk about paranormal stuff, and they'll be mocked because they'll say, like, "Oh, a werewolf," like at what is that? Skinwalker Ranch. Yeah, they'll talk it, and then they'll mock people as, "Oh, you saw this X, Y, and Z," and that's not even, it sounds so silly, but it's like, it makes sense if you're talking about something that's just changing its shape and its form based on what it wants to interact with you.
And programs. One of my good friends is Paul Sinclair. He's probably the leading, if not one of the leading, cryptozoologists out there. He's in the UK. But he's had cases, again, that imply that these aren't beings. They're programs. And programs have a learning matrix, hence the archetype of the cartoon character. And watch this. When that experiencer no longer believed in the archetype, again, we're measuring the response time of the phenomenon. It's not God. Right? It's not omnipotent. There's deficiencies at times where it glitches, where what happened was the entity realized it goes to the proto-intelligence, right? I'm pulling all these images. I'm not getting anything. And more than that, she's not believing in anything at this point. And she's like, Nathaniel, I knew this can't be, whatever the cartoon character couldn't be that. That's stupid, right? I was a kid at one time. I'd probably believe that, but it's been 4 or 5 years. The phenomenon was trying to update itself, right? Help me out here, guys. What am I going to do? She's not believing in me anymore. And so what's fascinating about this, and she said, Nathaniel, that's when its eyes, by the way, cartoon characters don't do this. She said its eyes blew up. It looked into my eyes, started, and it operated counterclockwise and clockwise, started moving. And she said, I'm looking at this thing going, what in the H are you doing? And I said, well, what did you think it was? She said, this is going to sound crazy. She said, but it was measuring my belief in its image. Measuring my belief in it. So the learning matrix is present. Now, entities, again, we're dealing with something that has the ability to wear that mask. Where's it getting it from? Us. Now, this is why we have experiencers who, if their only knowledge of the demonic is Ray Warren or somebody else, no disrespect to them, obviously, but I'm talking about the language preference and all that. Mm-hmm. No wonder they're seeing that. Why? Because that's the phenomenon, plucking it out of their head. Okay. Mask down. Here we go, boys. Now, in that learning matrix, it sometimes fails. Now, this goes all the way back to Eros and Evil with Ariel Masters, where practitioners of the occult, witches, all that, they thought that they were taking demonic flights. I'm not talking about on brooms or anything like that. Literally, they thought they were levitating out, all that stuff. No. They thought to be copulating with corpses and demons. And entire elaborate theatrical production was being performed on the part of the phenomenon. So here's what we have. Okay, we have the practitioner believing that they're being taken. Sounds like an abduction. They're being taken to a certain location that's not their own. That's the abduction too. And they're interfacing with entities that are copulating with them. Pretty much a lot of that's abduction. They are being tested and prodded by demons. Okay, we're getting closer. But in Ariel Master's book, Eros and Evil, he documents cases where even the practitioners were hoodwinked. And now after, again, remember when I told you that it's theatrical production, perception management, but it glitches like a program. The rendering, when the phenomenon is rendering images, sometimes it doesn't work. And so sure enough, there were cases where these people are looking around and thinking, okay, I thought I was copulating with a man. It's not a man, it's technology. That's a machine. Even down to this is, you want to edit this out, but the phenomenon had constructed these machines to fulfill the senses of the experiencer. It's not just a man, it's shaped like a man, if you know what I mean. Even down to the religious tradition they celebrated. They thought, oh yeah, smells like a girl, smells like a man, it's, all that. It's the right. It has to be a real. No, it's not. It was a program. And they're being poked and prodded by metallic objects that were designed, tailored to fulfill their sensory experiences. That, I'm afraid, is what we're dealing with. Is that, again, the learning matrix potentially has complete control over our perceptions when it wants to. That's a crack in the sky until it's not. That's an apparition until it's a ball of light. Paul Sinclair, and I guess I'll stop with this point. Paul Sinclair, back to this cryptozoologist. He has cases in Bempton and Winter Hill where groups of people are being stalked by a bipedal cryptid. It is a wolf man running towards them. So at one point, there was a group of people, a group of boys, I think it was like 3 or 4 of them, they're running by the train tracks, and they see this creature walk up on the train tracks, starts running towards them. They freak out. They start running for their lives. What is that? One of them gets tripped up and falls. They keep going. Finally, within safe distance, they turn around and stop. The entity catches up with the man that fell. Now this entity is hovering, standing over this individual. This individual is petrified. Oh my God. Right? Now, what would a wolf do? It would eat you. This program got down face to face down, all the way down, and then disappeared. Oh, it's a program. Another case of his where one of these cryptids is basically walking very slowly, but it's keeping pace with the car that's going 50 miles an hour. Why? It's not real. It's a program. And there are glitches within these programs that point to either a simulation or an artificial habitat that we exist in. And that, my friend, is the paranormal, the black cat in the matrix. It's glitching in and out. And we're starting to wake up to it. And the phenomenon doesn't want us to.
Why do you think? And why the fear? Is it the fear a key element to it and tapping into us?
Yeah, it gets back to even, again, Barry Fitzgerald's theory where with these animal mutilations that it's just like with a wild boar where you can taste the fear in the meat, where when it's dying, it puts out a chemical response of fear. Right? Again, it's not emotion. Now it's matter. It's there. It's present. Where Barry Fitzgerald, Steve Mayer were doing research in England where they were investigating cattle mutilations and the sinus ducts where the fear had produced such saliva. It was absolutely insane, the kind of fear that the phenomenon induced these creatures into. Insane. So fear does play a role. Absolutely. And a lot of times it's the love and light that draws us into that. Right? Okay, yeah. I'm your Jerry Edna, right? Or Ted Rice's case where in that abduction, the grandmother goes, I've only been intimate with one man and he's deceased now. Okay, fine. Goes back into a room, comes out as her husband, the one who's deceased. Why? Because these are games. These are masks the phenomenon wears. And that's why I and others are to the point now where, number one, we're being taken without our permission and sometimes without our own awareness. The phenomenon is carving sigils in our skin, under our skin, and potentially on our own consciousness, which we can't yet define. But we know that people are going out of body and in the body, and that even what we consider to be scoop marks in ufology may actually be the result of occult practices and experiments. Skin first, or soul first, skin second. It's no different than, that's what we're dealing with. And that's why, like, in my social media, I've been trying to prepare people where, like, all models are going to come down. We've got to collapse them all because this isn't our world. It's their world. And whatever they are, they're either in chart. They can either manipulate reality itself, which that's a whole other show on our worldview, right? Or at least mine. Well, if you're not God, you have to be a God. There's no room in demonology for something that can manipulate reality. I'm not talking about physics, right? Again, I'm talking about literally just creating things, materializing things. I'm going to put something in your house, by the way. I'm an unclean spirit. Let me do that. No. We're dealing with something different. And yet it wants to be worshipped. It wants all of the altars. And there is a faction within ufology that knows all of this. And they still go on and
what do you recommend people to do then? I know you said first, don't mess with it. Don't even reach out to it. So the people that are kind of like still dealing with things or do deal with paranormal stuff, do you still call the priest? Do you still go through those motions? Or do you, like you said, with your own personal experience, it sounds like you were able to handle the fear and kind of like move it away from how it was trying to impact you. What is the roadmap?
That's some of the newest research being done because a lot of this stuff was propaganda on the part of the phenomenon. Right, where you put holy water in there, okay, until you actually encounter what's beyond the mask. And that, my friend, we don't really have rules for. We have beliefs for, right? We have plenty of those. We don't have rules yet. So the one thing I would recommend is iron. Iron does work. Iron has always worked. We don't know why. We're not saying it works every time. But, if we were physicians and we said, okay, what would we prescribe more than everything else? It would be iron. That's why people use iron crosses, iron bracelets, iron rings. And for some reason, it only seems to be, I guess, successful above ground. Once we get underground, it doesn't work at all. So this is some of the newest research being done, but that's what I would recommend. But don't contact them.
Don't reach out.
They don't play by any rules.
Are there clean experiences where you can have something that you're actually tapping into the good side of whatever is after we leave our bodies with the consciousness or God? Are there things that you can have, whether it's angelic beings, maybe tapping into consciousness itself or NDEs when people have like life reviews and come back with like new meaning and purpose? I mean, what are those things? How do they fit into that model when you have this kind of thing that seems to control a lot here in a negative way?
In terms of NDEs, I'm still questioning that aspect of it. Because what's tending to happen is that people have one religious tradition and they'll pick out all the NDEs that justify it, validate it. And then you'll have somebody that's a Christian and then they'll have a near-death experience. And they shed all of that and they're now an atheist or something. And so my position is like, okay, if there's one heaven, there's one heaven. There should be one interpretation of heaven. If there's one heaven, there doesn't seem to be, and I'm still doing that research right now, but I don't know where I stand on that. I think, again, number one, we have to understand this, that a lot of these negative experiences is not because some of these beings are even evil. It's because we don't belong there. Like another book that I have behind me, it's anthropology, and it talks about an anthropologist and a Merovingian anthropologist. And he went all around the world. He had this one ritual of magic given to him that was really ancient. And he's like, I need to have all the ingredients for this potion. But they're all across the world. They're sprinkled in every corner of the planet. So it's going to take me 20 years to find this. And finally, I think it's like 25th year, he finally got all the ingredients. He performs the ritual, leaves his body, shows up, and an entity goes, "What are you doing here? Who are you? How'd you get here?" So it wasn't like the entity came into his world and was like, "Hey, man, you should know." He showed up somewhere without permission, and it was just like, "You shouldn't even be here. Go away." Those are some of the negative experiences we're encountering, right? Where it's like, okay, like you don't even belong here.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that is happening. But as it stands, at least necronetics wise, I do believe that some of these beings, if not all of them, are not demons, horns, and hooves, that these are, at least in this planet, are practitioners of the occult.
So would you warn against like the download? Because Diana Pasolka in that same little interview, she was saying that how she had done psychedelics when she was a teenager, and then she stopped, and she won't do it again now because she's afraid of what she'll encounter there, because people will have like 5 experiences that are great, and then the 6th one will be just terrible. And so like to your point, you don't know who you're encountering there, things that don't want you there. And then people say like they get a download of information, it's changed their life, or they have new insights and stuff. I would imagine you would say, hey, don't go for the download of information. To seek that, people are always seeking through meditation, through other avenues, a way of like insight, a way of like cleaning up their life or focusing. Would you warn against trying to pursue those experiences?
I would say in context. Demonology teaches that you are either manipulating it or it's manipulating you. Like it's either your consciousness and your spirit that's affecting this, or someone else's or them affecting you. And so I believe the lie is absolutely, this is going to be a great experience. Take this, do this, recite this. And then next thing you know, of course, like you said, you'll have 3 or 4 good experiences. Those will be solid, and I believe they're happening up until, again, you go beyond all of the archetypes, the programs, and the negative manifests. Whatever that is, it's... And again, the problem that I'm having now, especially, is that this sounds like religion. We can't skirt around that. I'm not talking about you and I, but in the field. That is the very definition of religion. And it gets back to a rather binary version of reality. The same people that are against building altars and worshiping these beings are also building altars and also worshiping the being. So somewhere in all of the clutter, we have to actually just say, okay, what are we really dealing with? More than that, why do these beings seek to be worshipped? Why do these beings want altars? And what's really going on here? And so I was told by a gentleman I know that has clearances that it's more like the jinn in Islamic lore. Yeah, Nathaniel, they'll give you anything as long as you worship them. And that put a chill down my spine because I thought, what is that?
Yeah, that's crazy. It's creepy because like it just seems like you just don't, like you said, you don't truly understand what's going on there.
No, again, what we do know. Okay, again, there's the three levels of knowledge: the known, the unknown, and the unknowable. A lot of this is the unknowable, right? And a lot of this is the unknown. But what is known is that despite the aliases of the phenomenon, we have sigils on skin, under skin, handprints on skin, underneath the skin. Whatever they are, they have access to the soul and the body. Whatever they are, they have actually threatened. Matter of fact, to your NDE question, in the book Beyond UFOs, there was a person who was actually induced into an NDE so that he could be threatened for his life. It was a catastrophic car accident. He's pulled out of his body by his confession and intelligent electricity. He meets these beings and they explain to him his condition. You're dying. You know that by now, don't you, sir? Yeah, I can tell. I don't know where I'm at, but I'm not in good shape. Yeah, this is your soul. You're dying. Your people, your doctors do not have the ability to put you back in your body and help you survive this collision. We do. Love and light, obviously, right? No. And then they were like, oh, yeah, if you want to live, we want you to promise that one day you will do what we want you to do and you'll say exactly what we want you to say. And in response, we'll go ahead and help you survive this and you'll exist for a little bit longer. He said, all right. And he gets put back into his body. By the way, one of our biggest abductees right now in his book was told by Hathor, remember our agreement? Oh, wait a minute. When was the agreement made? I don't know. Right? Hold up to your end of the bargain. Keep telling everybody what we're telling you to tell them. Why? The inference is because you know why. Remember your agreement, buddy. Remember that?
Man.
Right. Again, I don't know. I'm kind of fed up with that aspect of the research because, again, it's not enough to have an experience. We have to do, as researchers, we have to do research. And it's not just academic. We have to sit down with the phenomenon and be willing to say, okay, let's test the theory. Mm-hmm. If it's not provable, then maybe we need to do some more work.
Last little question for you. When people pass away, what do you think happens? And I know I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I because you're talking about the threats there that it's giving some people about when you die, we'll see you there. And obviously that's going to unnerve people, and you don't want to tell a lie just to make people feel good. Hey, here's like the happy truth of what's going to happen. But through your research, I know, and what I like about you is that everything's in flux. Like you're open to more data, more research to change your opinion. You're not just locked in on one set. I'm going to believe this till the end. But right now, what do you think happens after? Is it the Wild West and you got to, you're fighting to protect yourself, your spirit, as it goes into this other realm that we don't know yet the details about? Or is there an afterlife, in your opinion? Like, what does your belief sit right now?
Well, again, this is the result of a lot of deconstruction. I think that it depends on who you are. Obviously, I think I don't think all of us show up at the same location. I do believe that based upon how a person dies, that will determine whether or not that environment records them and what it records. I do believe that the soul itself is a different species of the body it inhabits. That is huge. And that we're merely avatars. And that some people are avatars for other entities. So they'll have a different death and a different experience, right? But for me, I think that some of us, at least, will be met with ancestors. There was a Hebrew commentary named Nahum Sarna. Say that 3 times. Named Nahum Sarna. He was going through the Old Testament. He's like, he's like, the Bible keeps talking about how these people are being gathered to their ancestors. And he's like, but a lot of these people were never buried with their ancestors. So it's not a burial motif. It's an afterlife motif, to where some of these people were buried like in unmarked graves, but were still gathered to their ancestors. So I do believe, at least now, that that there is an afterlife, and that some of us are gathered to our ancestors. I've seen people, like, before they die, like, oh, okay, Bug's here, or Bud's here, or he's coming to get me, that kind of thing. In addition to that, when my grandmother died, I got something from her. I had actually just done Coast to Coast AM for the first time. And back then they would make everybody use, it was an art bell thing. You had to use an in-home landline. I didn't have one. It's 2019, right? And so my grandmother was like, Nathaniel, I love your research, love you to death. I'm going to go ahead and pay for the landline. I'm like, it's only $30. I mean, but I'll take it, whatever. Thank you. She's like, no, I want to, do this for you because of your research. I said, okay, fine. So she does it. It's in my office. Well, it's been like a month after do Coast to Coast. It's still there. Well, she has cancer, goes into ER. She's in the ICU and stuff. She's in a coma. She's not going to make it. And I didn't know that at the time. I hadn't got the phone call yet. But I'm in the living room at my house, and I get a call from Carol Staten. I'm like, man, she's calling from the hospital. What's going on? This is going to freak you out. And at first I thought it was her boyfriend. I'm like, why is he calling me? Like, all right, like, no. So I let it ring 3 times, sent the voicemail. Calls again. I'm not talking to you, man. Like, I'm getting ready to go see grandma, like, whatever. 3rd time I get the phone call. Finally, I answer it. And I hear beeps. I hear her breathing.
Oh, wow.
Watch this. I look at the name. I said, Carol Staten. The last name Staten is spelled wrong. It's Staten. This is Ton. And I said, wait a minute. So I called it back. And it came from the landline in my office, Scott. I got chills.
Jeez.
It came from the landline in my office. But it sounded like it was in her hospital room.
Wow.
Weird.
Uh-huh.
So something's there. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what is on the other side. But I've met people who've had NDEs. I had one lady that told me that she had a traumatic brain injury. I mean, she had a skull cracked all the way down. And she said that she woke up in another world. Her father was there and told her it's not your time yet. And she said, I don't want to go back. My body's broken. I'm hurt. My life sucks. I can't take it anymore. I would rather be here with you, honestly. He said, you need to go back for your boys. She said, Nathaniel, I didn't have my twin boys for another decade. Another decade's gone.
Wow. So would you fall on, because that stuff is, you need time to pass, I guess, right? Because you're saying, like, you can't really trust these things that we're seeing and experiencing necessarily. But if something is not asking to be worshipped, enough time passes maybe where nothing ever happens again, you just had that one message from somebody, then does that lean more toward maybe that was something good from a benign source versus what we're talking about here for most of the conversation?
If it's Dear Aunt Edna, a lot of things, again, there's a lot of things we can use, I guess, to see beyond the archetype. If it's Dear Aunt Edna, what is it doing? What is its message? Because what we're seeing in the field is, like, a lot of these ghosts are programs designed to give you a message that may not even correlate with the life story, right, of that archetype. Barry Fitzgerald, Steve Mera had a psychic medium who had a guide, Becky. Oh, I'm on the other side. Oh, really? Yeah, you're Becky. Okay, yeah. Who is Becky? They asked him, go ask Becky who she is. Becky gave them a fraudulent life story, fake address. Never existed. Matter of fact, in one of their projects in their experience, they lined up 20 different people who thought they had been in contact with loved ones and guides and said, we want you to go ask them, hey, if I can ask you questions. Watch, again, we're dealing with programs. And each and every one of them came back, and one by one, independent from each other's knowledge. They don't even know each other exists. What did your guide tell you? Well, my guide said, do you want to continue having a relationship with me, or do you want to ask me questions? Can't have both. Programs that once you push beyond the archetype, it's an automatic response. Oh, by the way, that's a learning matrix. That's a construct. And the research that's being done now actively, myself and others, is that we're not just using imaging, but we're testing the construct, and we're getting all the same answers, because what we're dealing with, again, they do not appear to be not to be entities in and of themselves, just constructs. And so this is why this is my perspective. If anything comes to me and says, I'm your dear Aunt Edna or Grandma, I question immediately. Immediately. I want to see if it lines up with what I know of her. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as the physiognomy. I've had cases where the husband comes in the room and copulates with the wife, and then she's looking at the entity, and it's the matrix again. It's glitching. Its physiognomy is not lining up with the husband. That's how she saw through the matrix. So, in terms of where I'm at with with the afterlife, I don't know. I just know that necronetics, it teaches that some of these practitioners, they hinge their entire livelihood on the following phrase: if you die before you die, you will not die when you die. And so essentially what they're saying is, yeah, my body will die, but my consciousness is already in another body.
So I would love to have you back on in the future to go, chase other rabbit holes. But for now, can you tell everybody kind of where to find you? What's the best place that they want to email you or follow you on social media, and any stuff you have coming up?
Yeah, so I'm creating my own platform called Parasymposia, and that will include all of my research as well as some of the other researchers I'm currently working with. Hopefully, I want to have them on. It'd be amazing. Other than that, you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm at the most actively. And if you guys are interested in my lectures and interviews, you can go to my YouTube channel. I have a playlist of them that are it's just the ones that are on YouTube. I think we're up to like 170, I think it is. So yeah, it's interesting. If you go, if you filter it by like date added, you can go down to the bottom and then just follow the evolution of my research. But thank you, sir, for having me on. And I apologize for being so rusty. I didn't think I'd be this rusty. My mind was going bang, bang, bang.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, on another podcast, I saw you mention a book called The Dark Gods by Anthony Roberts, I think it was. But when you said that, you said to the gentleman interviewing you have to be really careful with this, or you made some comment. And I was just curious, maybe it was just an offhand comment and meant nothing. What did you mean by being careful? Are you just talking about anytime you delve into these subjects, you have to be careful about what kind of... Okay.
No. This is some of the most, again, from my perspective, data-driven research out there. And when I first read it, I read it on a PDF, and I was like, I'm going to buy the book, right? We're going to buy the book. It's like a $250 book. And when the very first few pages of it, I realized, oh no, it's profound. And I felt an immediate response on the part of the phenomenon. And I started having really bad nightmares. And I got to a point where I was even reaching out to a few of my fellow researcher friends and saying, you guys can pray for me or do whatever you can. I know the phenomenon has noticed me again. And so the goal here is to read, learn to an extent, but not to catch the eye of the phenomenon. Then you go hide in the shadows. That's how I know this research. But the day after that, my family and I were all in a car on the way to get dinner, and we were head on in a collision at 65, 70 miles an hour. Totaled the car, airbags deployed. And I knew it was the phenomenon. So do you not recommend anybody pick that up? And I recommend everybody pick this up. Okay. If you want to gamble with it. It's fascinating. I mean, to your own demise. No, I'm just kidding. But honestly, some of the best research you'll ever find is the stuff the phenomenon doesn't want out. But this is incredible. I do believe this is a part of the unified field theory. This is the book that I got the Professor Rene Hardy story from, the gentleman, right, where the guys just show up and we're on camera. Mm-hmm. This is more along the lines of John Keel's ultraterrestrial model of the phenomenon, to where we are living in an artificial habitat. and the phenomenon's present with us but absent from. It's the hand in the glove. We see the glove. We never come in contact with the hand until it's too late. And that's why this book is so profound.
Well, I'll leave it there and check it out at your own risk for everyone watching. But thank you again. It's been awesome. And like I said, I'd love to have you back on in the future, and the best of luck with all your future endeavors and your research. And if you come across anything really crazy or cool and you want to hop back on or something after you've kind of put it out in your own platforms, be sure to hit me up.
All right, brother. Thank you, sir.
If you have seen something you cannot explain, we run 2 anonymous pipelines: Veil encounters for listeners and first responder files for law enforcement, fire, EMS, etc. Voice masking and redactions are available, so you can stay anonymous if you want to. Links are in the pinned comment and description.